Well, the Yazidis are an ancient community in northern Iraq. They're farmers, mostly Kurdish speakers, and they practice a non-Islamic ancient monotheistic religion, and that made them a target for the Islamic State. The Islamic State accused them of being heretics, devil worshippers, and attacked their community in August 2014 and committed what is considered one of the worst war crimes, genocides of the 21st century. They essentially killed or tried to kill all men and boys down to a certain age. And they killed all of the elderly people too out of hand, and then they took young women and girls and very young boys into captivity. The young women and girls were sold as slaves and were in many cases held and resold for years, repeatedly raped, suffered torture, and the young boys were raised as what ISIS called lion cubs. So they were trained to be jihadis. They were converted to Islam, trained to be jihadi fighters and suicide bombers.
So what are members in the community telling you?
Well, so members in the community were brought to Canada under a program where Canada was actually one of the first countries that stepped up and offered to help the Yazidis. And 1,200 initially came in. They're very grateful for that. And since then, there have been some more coming in through reunification. And they want to thank Canada, first of all, for being a welcoming country, and all the communities, the private individuals who've helped them. The Jewish community in Winnipeg has been a great help to the Yazidis in trying to reunite their families and so on. But they also say that they were offered safe haven in Canada. And now they're saying that the court order to repatriate accused ISIS members makes them feel very unsafe. And some of them have been telling us that they've been suffering panic attacks and things like that. Let's listen to Jamila Nasso, who's with the Canadian Yazidi Association.
Canada was one of the first countries to respond to the plight of the Yazidis, and they couldn't be any more happy or grateful that they would come to a country like Canada where they could feel safe and protected, and a country who stood for all these great values of freedom, of rights, of justice. And they were thankful for that opportunity, but shortly after hearing the news that the Canadian government would be bringing ISIS fighters, they were heartbroken and betrayed, and a lot of them just broke down into tears.
Now, we don't know, of course, exactly who's coming back. We don't even know their names in many cases. And, you know, some of them deny being members of ISIS, having ever been members of ISIS. And the community is not able to, and is not attempting to draw specific lines between any of those individuals and specific atrocities against them. It's the repatriation generally that is upsetting them, because this is a very severely traumatized community that's made up of a lot of people who suffered rape, torture, you know, the indignity of being sold as a slave and so on. And all of this has awakened some of those memories for them.
So, Evan, what has the government said about the repatriation of the alleged ISIS members and now their families to now?
Well, I mean, it's important to note it's not a government idea. The repatriation has been ordered by a court. In fact, the government was resisting an order to repatriate 6 adult women, plus their children, who, of course, I think everyone agrees are completely innocent in this. And then the government stopped fighting that, agreed to bring them back, and almost immediately the court ordered the men to be brought home too. So the government hasn't yet said exactly how it's going to respond to that. We have no idea of what the timeline of that return would be. I think the Yazidis are aware that in Canada, governments follow court orders, and they're making the point that even if this does go ahead, they still want to be heard about what happened to them. They don't want the Yazidi genocide to be forgotten, and they want to remind the government, the courts, the Canadian public generally, of the true nature of the Islamic State, what it was really all about and what its members did.